Allow me to take on board every one of us who found time to come for this important interaction on Pan-African Unity Movement for Decolonization. My name is Dr. Muzvidziwa, who will look at the topic World Approaches to International Law and Internationalism in a Multipolar World. The topic is very important and key to the current discussions that continue to shape how the world develops. As a way of introduction, allow me to unpack the topic, World Approaches to International Law. This is how the systems that interact in this world take on board the meaning of the law and get ways of interpreting them so that they are governed by those laws or by those rules and regulations, both in human interaction as people jostle for the resources that are abound in the international system. This area clearly is a minefield because it raises a lot of emotions as we look at the historical interface of the multipolar world. Going down to history, we have also always and also had the first world and the other world. We have had the North-South divide. We also have had the issue of the center and the periphery. So as we look at the laws, international law, in those clusters, we raise emotions that continue to retard the way we can put together for the growth of the international system. Because our interactions have been guided by those dichotomies, the one who has got the brunt of the challenges in that dichotomy has always been the South. The South has provided resources for the North in raw form. The North refashioned the raw materials into finished goods, rebranded and sold to the South. The impact of this relationship clearly disadvantages the one who provides the raw materials. The South, therefore, must project an alternative for the laws that inform its interaction in the multipolar world. For my discussion, as scope items, I will raise 3 issues before I conclude. The first period, I will align the current challenges inherent in the multipolar world. I will also talk a bit about the factors that have shaped the interaction historically up to the current system. Then raise a few issues on the options available to the South for them to grow. After I've reflected on those, I'll then conclude my discussion. Now, for the challenges. The major challenge that has divided societies over the years deals with the reality of those who have and those who do not have. Over the years, political divide, north, south, and center periphery, are issues that have informed the type of laws that we have today. After the Second World War, we witnessed the creation of the United Nations, where 5 permanent members gave themselves the veto power. And this is the law that has continued to be challenged in the current structure of the United Nations. Veto power challenges the issue of democracy, as it is interpreted even in the First World itself. The rule of all by all. But here we see the rule of the few. Veto power is an important law that must be challenged by the South, and challenged seriously, because it has always given the South no voice at all. The South has to align with one or a combination of the veto power for its interests to be served. Because the challenge of the veto power is that once a law or an activity is envisaged in the international system, if it challenges the veto power, that nation has the right to stop and nullify whatever impacts or inputs that were necessary for the law to be effected. The current challenge is to do with the climate change. The North grew from the resources and the activities that today are found as destructive by the North who have developed. The depletion of the ozone layer, the South is being told how to use their coal because it has huge impact on the solar system. And if you don't align by the dictates of the veto powers, you find yourself in serious trouble. So the South cannot grow under the law of the veto power to utilize the resources abound in their nations, because the law says climate change must be addressed by the minimum emissions of the ozone layer into the ozone layer. So we have a serious gap here, and the veto law or the veto power is the one that challenges this reality. The second issue I want to raise on the current challenges is to do with the national interests. The reality is that all nations interact to service their national interests. And unfortunately, national interests have always been selfish. What is it for my nation if this law was going to be passed? And so the clash between what is it in me and what is it for the neighbor becomes issues that must be aligned before laws are passed. Allied to the issue of national interests is the aspect of sovereignty as it is defined by the United Nations Charter. United Nations Charter is very clear where it says all nations are equal under the law. One nation, one vote. Clear as it is, the implication is that is it really true that all nations are equal? If we go back to the concept of veto power, we can see the deception that is in this statement. So the issue of sovereignty remains one area that nations have to fight and shed blood to attain. I am a Zimbabwean who at the age of 18 left for the liberation struggle of Zimbabwe. So our struggle for democracy came after so many souls were lost. At the turn of the century 2000, when Zimbabwe decided to align the major resource land to the dictates of the nation, it was declared rogue, and the nation continues to suffer because it took an approach that did not favor the first world. So sovereignty, as we know it from the definition, does not give a nation its share. Nations have to fight for their sovereignty. And for the third world, if you don't align with any of the permanent five, and one of the powers intends to do whatever they want to do with you, you will find the challenge very, very painful. So, the current law, international law, in this multipolar world, does not favor those who are not mighty. It is clearly laws set to influence how bigger powers can push out their resources to determine how the system must be managed. You also know that the interconnectedness of both goods and services entail that the rule by the international system must take the day. If we look at the impact of the multinational companies who have clearly rubbished the issue of borders, the issue of sovereignty, and the issue of democracy, we can see why we have serious challenges with the international law as it is interpreted today. Let me leave that area for a while and look at the factors that have shaped interaction in this anarchical world. History is awash with the distortions of how the world has moved from the slave trade to colonialism and now to neocolonialism. Where was the law during the slave trade? And who interpreted the law? Are there any variations as we say them today? The answer here is no. We are in a new form of slave trade. We have seen the young and the aged being influenced directly or otherwise to shun the activities grown from local industry. We have seen the young shunning the rules that have governed the growth in their communities. Are we dealing with the new law, or the law has been like this since humanity started? Biblically, when God gave laws to Moses, for those who read the Bible, we saw the challenges of the law. Because what the law did to the people is to show them their inability to follow those laws. And there were punishments associated with those laws. Nations across the world have taken on board the same laws that we see in the Bible, and we still see challenges of those laws being broken. If we look at the laws that govern trade today, who is the serious benefactor or who benefits from those laws? We have seen the trade laws and their challenges, where big nations, where first world nations run for the resources in the third world. Are laws protecting those who have resources? There's a notion across Africa today. You are aware Africa has been given so many names. The Black Continent. But currently, Africa is the hub of all the resources that make this world multipolar as it is to run. But Africa is the third world. What benefits do we get from the resources that are abound in our nations? The activities of the multinational companies and corporations across the globe are creating serious challenges to the laws that must govern interactions in the international system. They make the laws and they determine how they are interpreted. They make the rules and determine who interprets them. In SADC, they created the laws and the rules that govern elections in member states. and commissions that are set up to monitor and report on activities pre-election, election days, and post-election days, have always been rebutted by those who live outside those rules. For better expression, what we have found true in all the elections that are run in Africa is the demand for the North to witness. The demand for the North to witness. And if they witness, the demand for the North to declare such free or fair or whatever name they want to call it. And this is according to the laws that govern electoral rules in the West. Fortunately, recently, we have witnessed circus even in the first world where it comes to challenges of elections. In the South, unfortunately, the challenges have always been spearheaded by the sender. If preferred candidates, those who would have promised aligning with the dictates of the sender, fail to garner support for them to wrestle power, those have been considered rigged. Those have been considered not meeting the standards expected in the international system. Those have been considered by any other name that the West will choose for a moment. Are we following laws of the international system? In the United Nations Charter, there is a provision in Chapter 8 that will allow regional institutions to determine how they must regulate international peace in their regions. So, in essence, those are the ones that must align laws and practices that govern their region. Is it true for the South? The amount of interferences in the laws that govern how the South interacts clearly demonstrates why the North has created structures that must rally on the way laws must be interpreted in the international system. So, we are in serious jeopardy if we look at the approaches to international law in this anarchic world. We are clustered differently and we look at issues differently. But if laws were to be fair, the clusters should determine how they must interact within the structure. Sadly, this is not the case. Before I conclude, let me raise a few options that the third world must rally behind. What the world has told the third world is that we need to catch up with the developments of the North, of the center. my feeling is that this is a very serious syndrome that the South must let go. The challenge of catching up is that because you rely on the development of the North, your foundation and basis is different. And so as you try to catch up, you take this and that again from the North. It is important that the South must abandon the catch-up syndrome so that they start from whatever base they are and walk slowly and cautiously to their growth. Imagine SADC as a region with 15 or 16 member states now, collective population over 200 million. If we're going to remove the borders that were given to us at the Berlin Conference and give a chance to those with capacity, to those who can innovate, to those specific areas of innovation, and they line up those renovations in the 200 million, where would we be tomorrow? We were given borders and we've aligned borders to sovereignty. I think this is a serious challenge. Sovereignty must never be associated to a small area, but rather a region in our case. We are sovereign if we can trade among ourselves and if we close or if we clear the borders, rubbish the borders, remove the borders. If we start regionally, then we have 5 regions in Africa as an example, where trade can happen among the 5 regions. If we then remove the borders in Africa, then Africa can start and build its capacities to grow and compete in equal terms with any other region that is found in this multipolar world. Once we have opened the borders, cleared the distortions of who belongs to who, we then set regional goals that must be met, that must speak to what is obtaining in that region. Look at the resource and how it is abound in SADC region, for example. We have all that it takes for nations to grow. But how do we grow if a nation decides to trade with a nations 1,000 kilometers away, disregarding the neighbor? So if we remove the border with the neighbor, we become one and we start trading among ourselves. The potential for growth in South is huge. If we look at the collective numbers that come out of the BRICS, huge. If they start trading as South-South, the benefits become huge. Then we will start to say we are now living as people who know how to utilize laws to their advantage. Let me conclude and say we still have the potential to align laws to our perceptions and guide our activities for the benefit of those around us. We must be inward looking for a start, for us to create capacity to be useful in the bigger room. It is time for Africa. It is time for the third world. It is time for the South to tell its story and live by the dictates of the activities that are inherent in our economies. Thank you very much.